Welcome to toy-polloi. No Legos were harmed in the making of this video.
Hello and welcome to toy-polloi and part 2 of this restoration of a vintage Action Man Solar Hurricane. You'll have seen in part 1 that I did work repairing the wing attach mechanism on one of these and also making some new ejectable pods to go on the side here and generally giving the vehicle a good clean. Now in part 2 we've got some really interesting bits of work to do. We need to build a new nose cone that goes on the front here. That we're going to have to build from scratch because I haven't been able to find one. We also need to repair the latch that holds the cockpit on and also sort out some replacement stickers because this whole vehicle is looking a little bit plain at the moment. So let's get straight on with the restoration. As the nose cone is missing on the front of this Solar Hurricane, I thought the easiest way to go about it was actually to construct one from scratch, because even as a child I remember this nose cone being quite annoying. It sort of kept falling off, and I'm guessing that is why it is missing on this one. So I've done a little bit of sort of preliminary work and I've constructed this just out of some thin cardboard. You can see here I've got lots of these sort of sheets of old cardboard that I keep by, and it's very useful for sort of constructing prototypes of things because in the end we want to be making this out of some styrene sheet, but styrene sheet is quite expensive whereas cardboard is very cheap. So all I've done is I've sort of lined this cardboard up sort of next to where I want to sort of make sort of shapes and that, and using a pencil sort of make rough shapes of what I'm going to do. I then cut those out and fine tune it until I've got something that looks like this, and you can see that that should fit on quite nicely. It's about the right sort of shape and the right dimensions, and so I'm going to use that as the basis to make my styrene version of this. Now there are going to be some additions to this. At the moment this is just sort of 4 panels of cardboard, but we need to add some bits to sort of actually hold it onto the front of the toy. You can see here there is a groove down either side of the toy that this should slide into, so I'm going to have to put some sort of extra bits of styrene on the inside here to make little ridges that will slide into that. It's also supposed to clip under here. So really to start with I'm going to convert this rough one from cardboard into one out of styrene, and then I will start modifying a bit more. And the way I've actually made this is just to sort of base it on the diagrams that Simon sent along with the sort of the remains of the Solar Hurricanes. So you can see there are sort of rough little bits of what the nose cone should look like. I don't have an original one to copy, so I'm sort of making this up. It may not be accurate, but it actually does fit with the toy and it will fit on quite nicely. If I ever find an original one I'll probably modify this a bit more, but certainly for now this will do. So I'm going to transfer this now onto some 1mm styrene sheet and I'll stick it together using some plastic weld, and then we can start sort of modifying it. I think because I'm only going to be using 1mm styrene sheet, I'm also going to add some ridges of 2mm styrene on the inside to give an extra bit of thickness to these sort of corners, because I do actually want to sand them down. There's quite a nice sort of bevel along the edges of these sort of the original part of the ship, so I want to sand these down and give them a nice sort of edge, and 1mm styrene doesn't really give you that sort of depth. So if I put some 2mm styrene inside as well, if I sand down past the 1mm stuff, it will still have some strength there. So let's transfer this onto the 1mm styrene, we'll cut it and we'll make it. So here's that same shape now constructed out of 1mm plastic card. You can see it's already quite firm. I have added a little bit of extra support on the front section there, so that's some 2mm strips of 2mm styrene just sort of stuck around the edge just to give it an extra bit of strength there. And I'm going to be doing the same along this edge as well, but before I can do that bit I need to add some of these strips because as you see this cone should fit on there as I mentioned, and then there are two little strips down the side that sort of hold it in place and a clip there. So I've cut these, this is some 1mm styrene again, I've cut this as thin as I can so that it just sort of fits in that groove. And I've also added a slight curve to this bit of plastic. You can see there, all you need to do that is actually just sort of bend it in your hands. You can see you can give a little bit of a curve to the plastic without much effort. So I've bent that so that it now matches the sort of curve to the side of the Solar Hurricane. We're going to stick these on. That should also sort of stay with the curve now that I've sort of added the curve to the main part of the plastic. Hopefully that will start to allow this to actually sort of attach to the front. Then we can add the little clip, then I can start sort of shaping it and doing the final things, because you can see it's a bit boxy at the moment, and I've cut the plastic a little bit large on this front piece, so that all needs to be sanded down and sort of shaped. But let's add these pieces and see if we can actually get this to clip into place. The plastic weld has now had time to sort of set, and I've trimmed off the bottom edges just to make it nice and neat. We can try this in place and see how well that works. Yeah, that's starting to fit quite nicely. It's actually holding on. I don't actually have to hold it in place anymore, so I think that is going to work. Now we need to add a little bit more sort of structure to the inside to give it some strength. So I'm going to add some extra bits of styrene just along these two edges there. That should give it that final bit of strength. And I'm going to cut a thin bit of plastic card, the 1mm stuff, that I can just sort of hook under there somehow. It needs to be, I can't really work out how this was originally sort of held in place, but if I cut a piece that sort of sticks out a little bit, I thought we can sort of jam it under and that should hold that on. But let's add the structure inside this to give it a bit more strength, and I'll just see what I can do with that. I'll stick something on and see what happens. So after a fair bit more fiddling, you can see I've added in some sort of support structures inside. Those are a little bit messily sort of plastic boarded in place, but it doesn't matter because all that's going to be hidden. And I've also added this little sort of 1 centimetre tab, which I've bent so it's got a bit of spring to it. And I've also added a little sort of extra bit on it to work as the clip that needs to sort of clip under here. And this, you can see if I sort of push that in place, does actually work. That's now all held in place quite nicely. So that clip, although sort of crude, does the job, and you can still remove it. So I'm going to let all the plastic weld properly dry now. I've put quite a lot on to make some of this extra soft, so I can sort of sculpt it in a sort of minor way by pushing it into all the corners. Once that's all dry, I've then got to do the fine tuning, really, and sand all these edges down, make it a little bit rounded, because I want it to match this as close as possible. So I'm going to round that all off. Then we can give it a coat of spray paint to make it this match the sort of grey of the other parts of the Solar Hurricane. But I'm really pleased with how well that's worked so far. So let's let this dry, then I can start sanding and sort of shaping it all, and we'll get this fitted properly. But I think that is a good sort of recreation of what the nose cone should look like. After a fair amount of sanding and filing, I've got a shape that I'm really quite happy with. It's looking very nice now. As you can see, I've softened off all of the sort of sharp corners and given them a slight sort of bevel there. It really does look quite nice. And I've actually done a little bit of extra work on this clip here. I didn't think it was quite strong enough, so I sort of reinforced that with some more styrene on the back of it just to make it a slightly stronger clip. It doesn't really need to be that strong, it just sort of gently clips it in place, but I wanted to just get that little bit of extra strength just to make sure it did work. I think now that is really as good as it's going to get from sort of my point of view. I've not tidied up the inside because you're never going to see this. It's all going to be hidden. Really, it's just this outer shape that I'm worried about, and you can see everything's quite nice and square as well. So I think that is going to be where I'm going to leave it. Now, it shouldn't be white, as I say. It needs to be a grey, sort of light grey colour. I'm going to go out into my garage now and see what paints I've got. Because we're still in the middle of lockdown, I've not been able to go down to a model shop to pick up paint, so I'm just going to use what I have. If I don't have quite the right one, I may sort of come back to this later on and give it a sort of second coat of paint to get it the right colour, but for now I'm just going to use what I have to hand. I gave the cone a quick undercoat with some light grey primer that I had, but actually that was still quite dark, and I've sort of had another rummage in my pot and I found I got some light grey Humbrol paint, which is what I've now just given this a coat of. You can see it's got a quite nice grey, but it's still a little bit too dark if we compare it to some of the other plastic used on the Solar Hurricane. So for now I'm just going to have to live with this. Once lockdown is out of the way and I can pop to my local model shop, I'll see if I can get a better match in colour, which is why I haven't put a top coat or anything on this. I've just left it as the sort of the matte grey finish because I do want to come back to that and see if I can improve it. But even still, even though it's slightly the wrong colour and it's it's not quite perfect, it does a really nice job. You can see just putting that on the front of the Solar Hurricane makes a massive difference. So I'm very happy with how that looks, even in this sort of slightly not finished state. I'm going to come back to that when I can get some better paint, and I'll put a nice sort of clear top coat on it as well to give it the same sort of shine that you can see on the rest of the Solar Hurricane. But for now, that's going to do a very good job, so we'll leave that until we can get the right paint.
P-O-Y P-O-L-L-O-I.
For the broken tab here on the cockpit glass, you can see it's snapped off. There should be a little sort of lip that comes down and sort of bends the same shape as this sort of outer piece of plastic, and that hooks under the back part here of the sort of the main body of the Solar Hurricane, and that has snapped off. That's actually a fairly straightforward thing to fix. I've got some clear polycarbonate plastic here, and I've cut myself a strip of that which is the same width as this sort of snapped off piece, and I've taken that out to my garage, and I've got a heat gun that I've used to bend it and shape it into the right shape. Basically what I did was clamp this piece of plastic into my workbench, heat it up, and then use a piece of wood to sort of shape it and make something that looks like it will do the job. And after a couple of minutes I've ended up with this. You can see that's quite a nice sort of angle. If I just hold that onto the back part of the ship, you can see that's going to fit quite nicely. I did a little bit sort of more modifications. As you can see, I've sort of rounded the edges and I've sort of trimmed it down, but if you work with a bigger piece of the polycarbonate, it's much easier to deal with. You've got sort of things to hold. If you try and work on the sort of the tiny piece at the start, it's not very easy. Now there are a couple of ways I can actually stick this on. I'm going to do a little test fit, and if this works I'm not going to bother replacing it. This is just some clear double-sided tape, so you can see that's the unstuck bit of the tape on the top there. You could actually use plastic weld. It does work very well with this material. In fact, you can see here there was a crack in the corner, and I've actually stuck that back together with some plastic weld, and it has stuck quite nicely. So I could stick this on with plastic weld, but to start with I want to do a test fit to make sure it actually works properly and sort of holds the canopy in place. So just a bit of double-sided tape on there will do the job. So I can now just press that underneath like so. And you can see the tape a little bit, and to be honest, if you did it with plastic weld, you would see the plastic weld a bit. So there's no sort of benefit of doing it either way, I don't think. Plastic weld will be stronger, a little bit messier. But if this works, I'm going to leave this as is. So let's try this. I can hook the canopy in place at the front, push this down, and see. I think I've actually left that too long just looking at that. So that's a good reason to do it with this sort of test fitting. You can see if things are going to work. Yep, I think my little clip, that shouldn't be as far out of that. It needs to be a little bit further back. So let me rearrange that and we'll try it again. But that's a good reason why, if I glue this in place and done it wrong, it would have been annoying. If you do it with the double-sided tape, it doesn't matter. You can easily change it. Okay, so I've made a couple more modifications of this clip now, just sort of refine the edge here to make sure that it's a little bit shorter. I think this now works, so I'm just going to clip that in place, clip that down. Yeah, that feels firm again. So there you go, it's a fairly simple thing to do. I may come back to that in the future and sort of glue it on properly, but for the moment the double-sided tape is certainly doing a fine job, and you can easily remove this and sort of take it off and put it back on again multiple times. So I'm just going to leave it for the moment. I may come up with a better fix than that, but for now that certainly does the job, and nothing's going to fall off of that while you're playing with it. I decided to have one last go as well at this nose cone because I've still not been able to get down to my local model shop, so I'm just sort of using what paints I had, and I found that I got a gloss white paint out in my sort of supplies pot. So what I've done is from a distance very lightly sort of put a dusting of that over the top of the grey. So if you look really closely you can see it's a little bit speckled, but at a distance it's now about the right sort of grey, and until I get down to the model shop I think this is a much better sort of finish. I've also added a little bit of a top coat onto it, so it's not got quite the final sheen I want, but it's certainly got a sort of a little bit more sort of gloss to it. And as you can see, it's not a perfect match, but it's much closer, and one day when lockdown is out of the way and I can get sort of to do proper shopping, I will find the right colour. But for now I'm really very happy with that, and the sort of mottled effect looks quite nice. At least it doesn't sort of stand out when you've got the ship all put back together, so yeah, that will do. In the end I decided to go for a UV activated glue to stick that little tab on. The double-sided tape was working quite well, but I wanted to make a sort of more permanent sort of attachment to it, because I don't think there's going to be a better way of doing this, and that does seem to clip on quite nicely. So the UV glue was a good solution, and the one thing I like about UV glue is it does sort of dry, also go when you not dry really because you set it with UVs, it goes very clear. If I'd done this with a plastic weld, you'd have got a sort of a slight frosting where the sort of plastic weld attached the two surfaces together, but with this UV glue it just sort of tends to go quite clear, so you can see a little bit of a sort of edge to it where the glue hasn't quite sort of squidged out far enough, but overall it's a very nice sort of neat bit of gluing. And these UV glue pens you can get quite cheaply now. So this is one, what's the name of this company, it's called 5 Second Fix. So you get the glue in this end which you sort of squidge out, and then this end has a UV light on it, you can just about see that there, which you then shine over the glue for about 5 seconds to make it set, and it sets really quite nicely. You can actually remove it still, because the sort of end result is a little bit more, I'd say, like a hot glue gun, so you can actually peel this off if you wanted to change it, and then scratch the glue away and it comes off without leaving any sort of marks on the surface. But overall it does glue very firmly. You can feel it, see I can actually push that, really quite a lot of effort pushing onto that, and it's not going to snap off. So there you go, that's the sort of way I finally fixed that tab on. The Solar Hurricane is looking really nice now, but it is missing the stickers, and luckily you can easily buy a set of replacement stickers for this whole vehicle. If you go to the website Unofficial Action Man HQ, you can see I've got their logo there. You can buy this set of replacement stickers from them for a very reasonable price. Now normally, if you've seen my restorations, I would have bothered to sort of make my own versions of these sticker sheets to sort of print out, but in this instance someone has already done the work, and these look really quite good quality. The print of them is very nice, and it's printed on some very nice quality sticky back paper. So all we need to do is actually cut them out, and there's a lot of these stickers and they need some very odd sort of placements, but luckily I have here a picture of the instruction sheet which does show where all of the stickers need to go. So I'm basically going to be following that. I'll cut all of these out and stick them on. Some are a little bit sort of odder than others and sort of less obvious. This big blue section in the middle actually goes over the sort of control panel that Action Man uses in the middle there, and then there are nice sets of yellow stripes and all sorts of things to go around it. So it's going to take quite a while because there's a lot of these to cut out. There's a couple that I don't need to use just because I don't have those parts. I've still yet to find this little destruction pack box that I mentioned in the first video. This sort of sits behind the seat of Action Man there in the middle. I've yet to find one of those, and there's a sticker that goes on the top of it. And also the original ejector pods here have a red sticker on the front. Obviously we don't have the original pods, so these little red dots, I will keep those safe just on the off chance in the future I do actually find some of these ejectable pods. And also the sticker for the destruct box, I'm going to keep that just in case I happen to find one of those in future. But for now, let's get cutting. A quick tip for you as well, if you've got scissors that have got sort of sticky marks on them from cutting other sticky sheets or sort of double-sided tape, get a bit of lighter fluid, put it on a kitchen towel, just rub it along the surface of the cutting edges, and that will take off all the stick that's been left by sort of previous sort of projects that you've worked on, and that will mean that the scissors will cut really nicely again, like that. And that means I can get some nice clean cutting when I get to cut these stickers out, and I won't get caught on any bits of old sort of sticky residue that are left on the side of the blades. After a fair amount of cutting, I now have all of the stickers ready to go on the vehicle, so I'm going to be using a pair of tweezers. I'm just going to work my way around following the diagram that I have to make sure I put them all in the right place. I've actually taken every part off the ship so that I can work on them individually, because I think that will make it a lot easier. So you can see here, if I bring in this wing, we have to put that sticker on that wing, and likewise just sort of work our way around. But they will make a big difference to how the Solar Hurricane looks in the end, because without it, it does look quite a plain ship. So as soon as we put these nice bright stickers on, it's going to look really lovely. So let's get these all stuck on. Is the end result. As you can see, those stickers make an absolutely massive difference to how the Solar Hurricane looks. It really sort of brings it to life. I think all these sort of nice sort of yellow and red stripes down the side just make it look like a really exciting space vehicle. And there's lots of little stickers all over the place. You can put some on the side. So we've got this SH109 on the back, just behind the ejectable pods. It says danger. And then inside the cockpit, there's lots of stickers over the sort of the main control panel that Action Man uses. It really just makes it look like a lovely vehicle. And I have to say, this has been a sort of grail vehicle of mine for many years. It's something I did have as a child, and then it got sold off many years ago, and I've wanted one sort of back in my collection for absolutely ages. It just looks so lovely. The electronics on this do work. There's a button on the side that you press and it makes this sort of awful screeching noise, and I remember my parents at the time thinking this was a sort of a dreadful noise. There's a light on the front as well that lights up, but it's just one of those awful 1970s noises, really sort of cheap sounding and certainly going to drive everybody mad. But the end result is that I have a Solar Hurricane, and it does look fantastic. It may not be exactly all original, because obviously I've made the nose cone there and these ejectable pods aren't quite original, but it doesn't matter. The overall effect is that I've got this lovely fantastic vehicle back in my collection, and it's been a real joy to restore this one, and lots of nice interesting fixes to do, and certainly something that's going to go on display here at toy-polloi. So I do need to say say a really massive thank you to Simon Rose, who very kindly sent this in as a project for me to work on. It's, as I say, just been great fun to do, and something that I've wanted to have back in my collection for a very long time. So massive thank you to Simon. If you've enjoyed this video, then hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.